Saturday mornings in the 70s meant turning on the television and entering worlds that made absolutely no sense. Living hats, talking sea monsters, dinosaurs that moved like they were stuck in molasses. Network executives seemed willing to greenlight anything with bright colors, and kids didn't question it. If you grew up in that era, these shows weren't just weird, they were your childhood. Here are the 10 weirdest TV shows 70s kids can't forget.
Who's gonna know?
Number 1. The Skatebirds. In 1977, as the Kroft brothers continued their Saturday morning dominance, they introduced The Skatebirds, a show about anthropomorphic birds on roller skates who hosted a variety program featuring multiple animated segments. The Skatebirds themselves, Knock Knock the Woodpecker, Scooter the Penguin, Satchel the Pelican, and their human friend Mickey, performed comedy sketches between the show's various cartoons. All three birds wore roller skates and moved around an elaborate set that looked like a cross between a skateboard park and a bird sanctuary. The costumes were peak Kroft weirdness, oversized bird heads with exaggerated features, colorful bodies, and permanent expressions created characters that were simultaneously childish and slightly creepy. The roller skates added an extra layer of absurdity. Why would birds need roller skates when they can fly? The show never explained, and kids didn't ask. The program included animated segments like Wonder Wheels, about heroic motorcyclists, and Mystery Island, a live-action serial featuring dinosaurs and jungle adventures. These segments provided the actual story content, while the Skatebirds supplied transitions and comedy relief. The show's theme song was typically energetic and catchy, promising adventures and fun with the Skatebirds crew. The live-action segments between cartoons featured the birds engaging in slapstick comedy, usually involving pratfalls on their roller skates or misunderstandings about human behavior. The Skatebirds only lasted one season with 16 episodes. It aired from September 1977 to January 1978, then vanished into syndication. Unlike some Kroft shows that developed cult followings, the Skatebirds remained relatively obscure. It wasn't weird enough to be memorably bizarre or good enough to be fondly remembered. Still, for kids who caught it during its brief run, the show represented a typical Saturday morning experience. Birds on roller skates, animated adventures, simple comedy, and a general sense of chaos that somehow held together for 30 minutes. It was weird, sure, but in the 70s, that was practically normal. The 70s gave us television that would never get greenlit today. Networks took chances on bizarre premises, trusted that kids would watch anything colorful and loud, and somehow these shows worked. They weren't sophisticated, they weren't polished. The special effects were cheap, the acting was often over the top, and the plots made no sense if you thought about them too hard. But they were memorable in ways that slick modern productions sometimes aren't.
Oh, zephyr winds which blow on high, lift me now so I can fly.
Number 2. The Secrets of Isis. The Secrets of Isis, which premiered in 1975, gave young viewers something rare for the time, a female superhero as the lead character. Andrea Thomas, a high school science teacher, discovered an ancient amulet during an archaeological dig in Egypt that allowed her to transform into the Egyptian goddess Isis. By reciting "O Mighty Isis," Andrea would transform into a superhero with powers over nature. She could command the elements, communicate with animals, and display superhuman strength. The show paired Isis with Shazam in the Shazam/Isis Hour, creating a Saturday morning superhero block. Joanna Cameron played both Andrea and Isis, bringing warmth and authority to the role. As Andrea, she was a relatable teacher who connected with her students. As Isis, she became a powerful figure who solved problems and taught moral lessons. Each episode featured students at her school getting into trouble, usually through poor decisions rather than actual villainy, and Isis helping them see the error of their ways. The show's effects were limited but effective for their time. Isis flew through obvious blue screen work. Her powers manifested through camera tricks, stock footage of animals and weather, and creative editing. The costume, a white and gold outfit with a cape and amulet, looked appropriately mythological without being impractical. What made the show stand out was its educational approach. Each episode ended with Isis addressing the camera directly, explaining the lesson viewers should take away. The show promoted positive values like honesty, responsibility, and courage, while giving girls a superhero they could admire. The Secrets of Isis ran for 2 seasons, producing 22 episodes. It was groundbreaking for its time, predating the modern wave of female-led superhero content by decades. Joanna Cameron became a role model for young girls who rarely saw women in superhero roles. The show's legacy extends beyond its original run. It influenced later female superhero characters and remains a fondly remembered part of 70s children's programming. In an era dominated by male heroes, Isis showed that women could be just as powerful and heroic.
Get a look at Gruesome Gulch from the air. All right.
Number 3. Wonderbug. Part of the Croft Super Show, which debuted in 1976, Wonderbug was a segment featuring 3 teenagers and their magical dune buggy named Schlepp Car that could transform into a superhero vehicle called Wonderbug. Barry, Cece, and Susan drove around in what appeared to be a beat-up old jalopy. When they blew a magic horn, Schlepp Car would transform, via obvious jump cuts and different camera angles, into Wonderbug, a shiny, powerful vehicle with a face, eyes, and the ability to communicate through honks and beeps. The trio used Wonderbug to solve crimes and help people in trouble, usually battling bumbling criminals who seemed more confused than dangerous. The show's villain, Evel Knievel, yes, that was actually his name, a blatant ripoff of Evel Knievel, appeared in several episodes causing mayhem that the teens had to stop. The special effects were minimal. Wonderbug's transformations were accomplished through crude edits that fooled nobody. The car's face was painted on the front, with headlights for eyes and a grill for a mouth. When it needed to express emotion, the camera would zoom in on these features while sound effects played. The show only produced 16 segments that aired as part of the larger Croft Super Show package. It wasn't sophisticated or particularly well made, but it had the same charm as other Croft productions. The premise was simple enough for kids to follow. The adventures were harmless fun, and Wonderbug himself had enough personality to make viewers care about a dune buggy. Looking back, it's impossible not to see Wonderbug as a low-budget attempt to capitalize on the success of shows like Speed Buggy and other anthropomorphic vehicle programs. But in the context of Saturday morning television in the mid-70s, it fit right in. Kids watched it, enjoyed it, and moved on without thinking too hard about the questionable logic of a car that could think and feel.
Come on, Junior! Come on, let's escape!
Number 4. Far Out Space Nuts. Bob Denver, fresh from his success as Gilligan on Gilligan's Island, returned to television in 1975 with Far Out Space Nuts, a show that asked what would happen if you took the Gilligan formula and launched it into space with even cheaper production values. Denver played Junior, a clumsy NASA worker who, along with his equally inept colleague Barney, accidentally launched themselves into space in a rocket they were loading. Instead of their countdown going 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, they mistakenly went 2, 1, 5, 4, 3, and before they knew it, they were hurtling through the cosmos. The show followed the pair as they crashed on different planets each week, encountering bizarre alien life forms and getting into slapstick situations. Their companion was Honk, a furry alien who communicated only by honking like a horn. Every planet they visited looked suspiciously like a Southern California soundstage dressed with foam rocks and cheap props. The special effects were bargain basement even by 70s standards. Spaceships dangled from visible wires. Alien creatures were clearly people in ill-fitting costumes. The planets they visited all had breathable atmospheres and Earth-like gravity, convenient for a show with no budget for depicting actual alien environments. The prop department seemed to work primarily with foam, spray paint, and whatever they could find at the local hardware store. Denver brought his trademark physical comedy to the role, mugging for the camera and taking pratfalls with the same energy he'd shown on Gilligan's Island. The formula was identical. Bumbling characters get into predicaments, try harebrained schemes to escape, and fail spectacularly before stumbling into an accidental solution. If you'd watched Gilligan's Island, you'd seen this exact structure dozens of times, just without the space theme. The show only lasted one season with 15 episodes. It aired on CBS Saturday mornings from September 1975 to May 1976, then disappeared into syndication obscurity. Unlike some of its contemporaries, Far Out Space Nuts never developed a cult following or nostalgia factor. It was too derivative of Gilligan's Island and too cheap even for an era that tolerated low production values. Still, for kids who watched it, the show provided simple laughs. Bob Denver's charm carried weak scripts, and the sheer absurdity of the premise had its own appeal. You didn't need sophisticated special effects to enjoy watching two goofballs bounce around fake planets getting into trouble.
They're toughest guy wants to meet our toughest guy in the alley right now.
Gosh, Fleeg, what do we do?
Number 5. The Banana Splits Adventure Hour. The Banana Splits Adventure Hour premiered on NBC in September 1968, but remained in heavy rotation throughout the early 70s, making it a staple of the decade's Saturday morning lineup. 4 anthropomorphic animals in rock band costumes, Fleegle the Beagle, Bingo the Gorilla, Drooper the Lion, and Snorky the Elephant, hosted a variety show that mixed live-action comedy, animated segments, and genuinely catchy musical performances. The costumes were simultaneously appealing and unsettling. The oversized heads, bulging eyes, and permanent grins created an uncanny valley effect that some kids found charming and others found disturbing. The Splits drove around in psychedelic banana buggies and performed slapstick comedy between the show's various segments. The program included serialized adventure segments that became cult favorites. Danger Island, directed by Richard Donner before he became famous for Superman and the Goonies, followed a group of castaways trying to escape a remote island while pursued by pirates. The Arabian Nights featured a group of heroes battling an evil sultan. The Three Musketeers adapted the classic tale for young viewers. The Banana Splits themselves performed several songs each episode, including the impossibly catchy theme song with its tra-la-la chorus that burrowed into viewers' brains and never left. The music was legitimately good, produced by professionals who understood how to write songs that kids would remember. The show's psychedelic aesthetic captured the late 60s and early 70s perfectly. Bright colors assaulted the screen. The set design looked like it was created during an extended visit to a candy store. Everything moved fast, jumped quickly between segments, and kept the energy at maximum levels at all times. Behind the scenes, the show employed the Hermine Midgets, a troupe of little people, inside the costumes. This allowed the characters to move convincingly and perform physical comedy that wouldn't have worked with taller actors. The show rarely acknowledged this publicly, but it was an open secret in the industry. The Banana Splits Adventure Hour ran until 1970, but reruns continued throughout the decade. The show influenced countless variety programs that followed, and in a strange twist, it was adapted into a 2019 horror film that reimagined the characters as murderous animatronics. That version bore no resemblance to the original, but it proved the characters remained recognizable nearly 50 years after their debut.
Are you alright? Yeah. Now, why did you do that? You could have been killed.
Because if I didn't, he could have been eaten.
Number 6. Land of the Lost. Land of the Lost premiered in September 1974 and immediately stood apart from typical Saturday morning fare. Instead of gentle lessons and silly costumes, it offered genuine science fiction concepts, darker tones, and special effects that ranged from surprisingly effective to laughably cheap. The Marshall family, Park Ranger Rick and his children Will and Holly, fell through a dimensional portal during a rafting trip and ended up in a prehistoric valley filled with dinosaurs, mysterious technology, and hostile creatures. They lived in a cave, rationed their supplies, and spent 3 seasons trying to find a way home. The premise was simple enough for kids to follow, but complex enough to keep them engaged week after week. The show took itself seriously in ways most children's programming didn't. Writers included actual science fiction authors like Larry Niven, Ben Bova, and D.C. Fontana. They created an intricate mythology involving time portals called pylons, ancient technology from a civilization called the Altrusians, and complex time paradoxes that required real thought to follow. Episodes didn't talk down to young viewers. They presented genuine science fiction concepts and trusted kids to keep up. The dinosaurs were created with stop-motion animation that gave them a distinctive jerky quality. Kids didn't care that the T-Rex they nicknamed Grumpy moved in stilted increments. The threat felt real. The Sleestaks, lizard-like humanoids who lived in the Lost City, were genuinely creepy with their hissing vocalizations and slow, menacing movements. These weren't cuddly monsters or bumbling villains. They were dangerous, and the show never let you forget it. The show even created a complete language for the Pakuni, the primitive ape-like people who inhabited the land. Linguist Victoria Fromkin designed a 300-word vocabulary based on West African speech patterns. The show gradually taught viewers this language over multiple episodes, adding an educational element to the adventure. Kids could actually learn to speak Pekuni if they paid attention, which many did. Spencer Milligan played Rick Marshall for the first 2 seasons before leaving due to a contract dispute. The show wrote him out by having him disappear through a portal, then replaced him with his brother Jack, played by Ron Harper. This changed the family dynamic but didn't stop the show's momentum. Uncle Jack brought a different energy to the role, more military, less warm, but the core of the show remained strong. Land of the Lost ran for 43 episodes across 3 seasons, far more than most Croft productions. It developed a devoted cult following that persists today. The show was remade in 1991 and adapted into a 2009 feature film starring Will Ferrell, though that version traded the original's earnest science fiction for broad comedy. The original series remains beloved for its ambition. It tried to tell complex stories with limited budgets and mostly succeeded. The effects were cheap, the sets were obvious, but the ideas were genuine. Kids who watched it remember being challenged to think about time travel, parallel dimensions, and survival in ways that other shows never attempted.
All right, stifle.
Number 7. Sigmund and the Sea Monsters. In 1973, the Crofts moved from land to sea with Sigmund and the Sea Monsters, a show about a friendly sea monster who befriended 2 human boys and hid from his family, who wanted him to be scary instead of nice. Sigmund lived with brothers Johnny and Scott, who discovered him on the beach and smuggled him into their clubhouse. His family, Sweet Mama, Big Daddy, and his brothers Blurp and Slurp, lived in a cave and constantly searched for their wayward relative. The sea monster costumes were exactly as ridiculous as you'd imagine, with lumpy green bodies, bulging eyes, and seaweed-like appendages. The monsters were supposed to be frightening, but the execution made them look more like rejected puppets from a children's theater production. The show had that typical Croft mixture of gentle humor and occasional eeriness. The sea monster family was supposed to be menacing, but came across as bumbling and ineffectual. Sigmund himself was sweet and cowardly, more interested in friendship than frightening people. His attempts to be scary usually ended in failure, which disappointed his family but delighted the boys. Each episode typically featured Sigmund trying to prove himself to his family, while the boys helped him stay hidden from discovery. Billy Barty, a well-known actor, played Sigmund, bringing warmth to the role despite being encased in foam rubber. The suit must have been sweltering under studio lights, but Barty made Sigmund endearing. Kids rooted for him to stay hidden from his family and continue his adventures with Johnny and Scott. Barty's performance gave the character genuine heart, making viewers care about a sea monster who just wanted to be accepted for who he was. Each episode followed a simple pattern. Sigmund would get into some kind of trouble. His family would show up looking for him. The boys would help him hide or resolve the situation. Everyone would learn a gentle lesson about friendship or honesty or courage. The formula worked well enough to carry the show through 2 seasons without wearing out its welcome. The Southern California beach setting gave the show a different feel from the Crofts' other productions. Instead of soundstage forests or fantasy islands, this was recognizably the real world, which made the sea monster's presence even more absurd. Regular people walked by in the background while sea monsters hid behind rocks. The juxtaposition of normal beach life with ridiculous monster costumes created an oddly charming effect. The show aired from 1973 to 1975, becoming another Croft staple of 70s Saturday mornings. It was eventually revived in 2016 by Amazon Studios, proving that even the strangest concepts can find new audiences decades later.
Where am I? Welcome to Tranquility Farm.
Number 8. The Bugaloos. In 1970, the Crofts struck again with The Bugaloos, a show about 4 teenagers who dressed as insects, had wings, lived in a magical forest, and played in a rock band. If that sounds like someone threw The Monkees, Peter Pan, and a nature documentary into a blender, you're not far off. The Bugaloos, IQ, harmony, courage, and joy, wore antennae and glittery insect-inspired costumes while performing upbeat pop songs and flying around their forest home called Tranquility Forest. Their harmonies were actually quite good, which made sense since the actors were professional musicians. Their nemesis was Benita Bizarre, played by Martha Raye, a washed-up singer obsessed with becoming a star again. She operated a jukebox empire from her headquarters and spent every episode trying to kidnap the Bugaloos and steal their musical talent. Her sidekicks included Funky Rat, who spoke in rhyming jive, and Woofer and Tweeter, her chauffeurs. The show lasted 1 season with 17 episodes. The British-American production featured music by Lala Productions and catchy songs that kids hummed long after the episodes ended. The Bugaloos performed several musical numbers each episode, giving the show a variety program feel mixed with fantasy adventure. Looking back, the makeup and costumes were simultaneously creative and unsettling. Benita Bizarre's heavy makeup and wild wigs made her look more like a Halloween costume than a children's show character. The Bugaloos' wings were clearly visible wires and fabric, but kids didn't care. They wanted to believe in teenagers who could fly. The forest setting, created on sound stages, had that distinctive Croft look, bright, artificial, slightly off-putting. Trees had faces, mushrooms popped up everywhere. The whole world felt like it existed in some parallel dimension where normal rules didn't apply. Despite lasting only 1 season, the Bugaloos left an impression. The songs were genuinely catchy, the characters were likable, and the sheer weirdness of the premise made it memorable. You didn't see shows about insect teenagers playing rock and roll every day. You still don't.
This is my pal Freddy. He's the only talking fruit in the world.
Please, Jimmy, squeeze the water out of me.
Number 9. H.R. Pufnstuf. Though it premiered in 1969, H.R. Pufnstuf bled into the 70s through constant reruns and set the template for the decade's weirdest children's programming. The show introduced viewers to Living Island, where a friendly dragon named H.R. Pufnstuf served as mayor and everything. Trees, boats, houses had a face and could talk. Young Jimmy, played by Jack Wilde, landed on the island after his magical talking flute, Freddy, convinced him to hop on a boat that turned out to be a trap set by Witchy Poo, the island's cackling villain. Witchy Poo, played with gleeful villainy by Billy Hayes, wanted Freddy the flute for herself and spent every episode scheming to steal the instrument from Jimmy. The show's psychedelic aesthetic was impossible to miss. Bright, clashing colors covered every surface. The costumes looked like fever dreams. Talking mushrooms, singing clocks, and anthropomorphic everything filled the screen. Looking at it now, you can see why parents in 1969 wondered if the creators had been taking something stronger than coffee. Each episode followed a similar pattern. Witchy Poo would hatch a plan to steal Freddy. Jimmy and Pufnstuf would outsmart her. She'd flee on her vroom broom, cackling and promising revenge next time. Despite the repetitive plots, kids couldn't get enough. The show only produced 17 episodes, but they aired in reruns throughout the early 70s, introducing new viewers to Living Island's bizarre charms. The Croft brothers created the show after developing the concept for the 1968 Hemisphere Exposition in San Antonio. They'd built a walkthrough attraction and realized the characters could work for television. What they created became a template they'd follow for years. Bright colors, kid protagonist, magical world, incompetent villain, and production values that looked cheap even by 70s standards. The show spawned a feature film in 1970, a stage show, and enough merchandise to prove that kids didn't mind the weirdness. They embraced it.
Unmatched in the annals of magicdom today!
No, Ronji, don't!
No, get away from that!
Number 10. Lidsville. In September 1971, Sid and Marty Krofft premiered what might be their strangest creation yet, and that's saying something for the team behind H.R. Pufnstuf. Lidsville asked a simple question: what if hats were alive and had personalities? The show followed Mark, played by Butch Patrick, fresh from his role as Eddie Munster, who fell into a magician's hat at a magic show and landed in Lidsville, a world populated entirely by living, talking hats. Every hat had a personality matching its type. The cowboy hat drawled with a Western accent. The policeman hat enforced the rules. The witch hat cackled. You get the idea. The villain was Horatio J. Hoodoo, played with manic energy by Charles Nelson Riley. Hoodoo was a green-faced magician who flew around in his catamaran, zapping the good hat people with magic bolts and demanding they pay their hat tax. When Mark helped Hoodoo's genie, Weenie the Genie, escape from captivity, the villain made it his mission to recapture both of them and prevent Mark from ever returning home. Billy Hayes played Weenie, bringing the same over-the-top energy she'd brought to Witchy Poo in H.R. Pufnstuf. The genie was thoroughly incompetent, which meant most of his magic spells backfired or accomplished nothing useful. This didn't stop Mark from relying on him episode after episode. The dynamic became a running joke. Mark would ask for help, Weenie would mess up the spell, and chaos would follow. The show only lasted one season with 17 original episodes, airing from 1971 to 1973 on ABC before moving to NBC for reruns. The production was apparently miserable. Butch Patrick later said he hated every day he went to work. The costumes were uncomfortable, the studio lights were sweltering, and the foam padding actors wore under the hot lights made filming unbearable. Patrick has been candid in interviews about how difficult the experience was, particularly for a teenage actor trying to establish himself beyond his Munsters fame. The Crofts had to create every single costume from scratch since the premise didn't allow them to reuse costumes from previous productions. They also made the unusual choice to have voice actors record dialogue live on set rather than dubbing later, which caused constant confusion about which hat was supposed to be speaking at any given moment. Actors inside the costumes couldn't see well, couldn't hear clearly, and often had no idea when their character was supposed to be talking. Despite the behind-the-scenes chaos, Lidsville became a cult classic. Kids loved the puns, the bright colors, and the sheer absurdity of a world where hats were people. The theme song promised a far-out, way-out psychedelic trip, and it delivered exactly that. Adults watching with their children couldn't help but wonder what the writers were thinking, but kids didn't care. They wanted to see what ridiculous situation Mark would get into next, and whether Weenie's magic would actually work for once. If you watch these shows, they're part of your childhood whether you want to admit it or not. You remember the theme songs word for word. You remember the costumes and how they looked simultaneously amazing and ridiculous. You remember the characters and their catchphrases. You remember sitting on the floor in your pajamas, eating cereal from a bowl balanced on your knees, and accepting that yes, hats could be alive, and teenagers could have wings, and cars could talk, and sea monsters could be friendly. That was the magic of 70s children's television. It asked you to believe in the impossible, and for 30 minutes every Saturday morning, you did. The shows didn't explain themselves or apologize for their weirdness. They just presented their bizarre worlds with complete confidence and invited you to come along for the ride. And millions of kids accepted that invitation every weekend. These shows created shared experiences for an entire generation. On Monday mornings at school, kids would talk about what happened on Land of the Lost or debate whether Sigmund would ever be accepted by his family. The shows gave kids something to look forward to each week and something to discuss with friends. In an era before streaming, before on-demand entertainment, before kids had hundreds of channels to choose from, Saturday morning television was an event. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more nostalgic content from the 70s and beyond. What was your favorite weird show from this era? Let us know in the comments below.